Every scar, every burn, every mark told the story of a battle survived. But at that moment, the young princess, seeing the lone human who had endured the chaos of space, understood what true courage really meant for the first time. The wind tore across the jagged cliffs of Viridian 7, carrying with it streaks of violet dust that shimmered against the stormlit sky. Sparks of ionized energy split the air in sudden arcs, lighting the ruined outpost in brief flashes of white-blue brilliance. The soldier limped forward, each step a small rebellion against the throbbing ache in his leg. His armor, once pristine, was now a chaotic patchwork of scorch marks, gashes, and missing panels, the synthetic fabric beneath exposed in places where the battles of countless skirmishes had been fought and won or lost, depending on the perspective of the observer. His right shoulder bore a jagged scar that ran from collarbone to bicep, a souvenir from an encounter with a quadrupedal drone whose claws had a taste for human flesh, or at least for it seemed. The left forearm had been scorched, the skin beneath permanently marred, evidence of a plasma blast from an enemy ship that had clearly underestimated his ability to duck at exactly the right moment. He stumbled over a twisted piece of metal, a remnant of what had once been the control tower, muttering under his breath. One day I swear these ruins are conspiring against me, or maybe it's just bad luck and questionable life choices. His voice echoed oddly against the distant walls, swallowed almost immediately by the growling wind. He couldn't help a grim chuckle, shaking his head. Humor was a survival skill as important as aiming a weapon or knowing when to duck. A soft, uncertain sound caught his attention, a footfall delicate yet urgent, carrying the faint shimmer of something almost otherworldly. He froze, squinting through the haze of dust and lightning flashes. From the shadowed edge of the outpost, a figure emerged. She moved with a cautious elegance, her long, elf-like ears brushing her shoulders, catching stray sparks of violet light and reflecting them back in pale glimmers. Her skin had the faintest shimmer of silver, subtle and mesmerizing under the stormlit sky, and her blonde hair was loose, flowing freely despite the gusts that whipped it into a halo around her head. Her eyes were impossibly wide, like twin pools of curiosity and disbelief, fixed entirely on the human soldier. She staggered slightly as if she'd forgotten the basic physics of walking in such a tumultuous environment, and her voice, sharp with shock, cut through the wind. "How many battles have you survived?" she asked, and even in the metallic echo of the ruins, her tone carried wonder and the faintest hint of judgment. The soldier raised an eyebrow beneath his helmet, a wry grin forming despite the cuts and grime on his face. "Survived?" he asked, tilting his head. "I stopped counting after the third one. Honestly, I think my liver keeps score and it's still filing complaints." He gestured vaguely toward the remnants of the outpost. "I could give you a number, but it'd involve a lot of paperwork, a few existential crises, and a small parade of angry space lizards who still hold grudges." The princess blinked at him, a mix of skepticism and incredulity flickering across her features. "Space, lizards," she echoed, her voice tight with disbelief, though she fought a grin at the absurdity of it. "They're very diplomatic creatures if you avoid crushing their favorite snack or accidentally stepping on their sense of superiority," he continued, his tone deadpan. "I learned that the hard way. Let's just say negotiations involved me dangling upside down from a gravity conduit, while they debated if I was edible or merely entertaining." Despite herself, the princess let out a soft laugh, a sound that cut through the storm and startled him enough to glance sideways. Her expression softened as she realized he was not just recounting horrors, he was painting them in absurd, almost comical brushstrokes. She leaned forward slightly, curiosity overtaking caution. "You make it sound amusing," she said, her voice tinged with a mixture of disbelief and fascination. He shrugged, rubbing a hand over his scarred shoulder, making a face as if the motion itself was a minor inconvenience. "Amusing. Maybe, but it's either laugh or cry. Preferably laugh, though the crying option comes up occasionally when I stub my toe on a shard of wreckage from a starship that had no business being that pointy." The princess stepped closer, her long ears twitching as if picking up nuances in the electrical storm around them. She tilted her head, observing him with a mixture of admiration and incredulity. "You're still standing," she said softly. "And you're joking." "Yes," he said, grinning, though the effort of balance and fatigue made it a little crooked. "Mostly joking. If I weren't, you'd probably have a very interesting story about a human who discovered how to endure every wrong choice in the galaxy without completely combusting. Spoiler alert, I'm me, so the endurance part is a given. The combusting, well, mostly avoided." She shook her head slowly, as though processing the impossibility of his life, yet the corners of her mouth lifted despite the danger all around. You don't take yourself too seriously," she remarked, "even after everything." "Mostly because if I did," he said, gesturing to his body, "I'd be curled up somewhere, muttering darkly about how the universe has it out for me. Which it probably does, honestly. But where's the fun in that? Laughter keeps you alive just as well as armor plating, sometimes even better." Her gaze lingered on the deep lines and scars etched across his body, the silent testimony of battles that no words could fully convey. She noticed the way his left forearm was discolored, the jagged marks along his collarbone, the way his stance carried a lifetime of barely survived calamities. Yet he seemed light, almost playful in his self-mockery, and she felt an unexpected pang of respect mixed with amusement. I've never met anyone like you," she admitted, voice almost lost in a gust that rattled the remaining metal structures around them. "I've read stories of warriors, of courage, of battle, but they always seemed distant, abstract. Yours is," she paused, searching for words. "Yours is real and strange and funny." "Strange is my specialty," he replied with a wink, though one side of his face twitched with fatigue. "Funny, well, humor is my survival tactic, though some might call it insanity. I call it science. Experimental laughter under pressure." He took a step toward her, careful not to appear threatening, and gestured toward the jagged skyline. "If you're wondering whether humans are all like me, the answer is no. Most are a lot less entertaining and a lot more boring. I'm a premium model, limited edition, slightly scarred. Collector's item." Her laughter bubbled again, this time more fully, and for a fleeting moment, the storm seemed to pause, as if the universe itself was curious about this strange meeting of human grit and alien wonder. She shook her head, brushing a loose strand of hair from her shimmering face. "You really are unbelievable," she said, smiling despite herself. "I get that a lot," he admitted with mock solemnity, bowing in the middle of the rubble-strewn floor. "Though most people don't survive the first glance at the scars without a faint swoon. You're handling it remarkably well. Bravo." The princess stepped closer, the storm swirling around them like a living backdrop for a moment that felt suspended in time. "Tell me," she said, voice quieter now, tinged with curiosity rather than shock, "about the first battle, the one that made all the others necessary." He sighed theatrically, dropping onto a jagged slab of concrete, as if gravity had suddenly decided to enforce itself fully. "Ah, the first one. Where do I start? It involved a hyper-intelligent droid, a cafeteria with questionable hygiene standards, and a minor interstellar incident that still gets me mocked by my squadron. Let me tell you, surviving a sentient robot that argues philosophy while trying to vaporize you really puts your sense of humor to the test. Spoiler: I failed the philosophical arguments, but survived the vaporization attempt. Barely, but mostly survived, which counts in my book." Her laughter mingled with the howling wind, bright and unrestrained, echoing across the ruins in a way that made him almost believe the storm itself was listening. She leaned closer, studying his scars again, but now without fear, without judgment, simply fascination. "And you're still standing," she murmured, "and still joking." "Mostly," he said, tilting his head with a mock-serious expression. "Sometimes the joke is survival itself. You'd be amazed how funny dying is." The princess shook her head, long ears flicking in the storm. I think I would," she said softly. "But you make it lighter, somehow." He smirked, gesturing to the horizon where the twin suns of Viridian 7 struggled to break through violet clouds. "That's my secret," he said, voice low but playful. "If you can laugh while staring death in the face, it loses a lot of its punch. Also, helps to have a good audience." She laughed again, shaking her head in disbelief and wonder. I think I'm going to like learning about your universe, she admitted, stepping slightly closer to the ragged human who had somehow survived enough to make her laugh despite the storm, despite the scars, despite everything. Good, he replied, leaning back against a jagged pillar, grinning through sweat, grime, and fatigue. Learning about me is educational, entertaining, and occasionally dangerous, but mostly fun, I promise. She tilted her head, her expression a mixture of awe, amusement, and something new she hadn't expected, trust. We'll see about that, she said, and for the first time since stepping onto this war-torn world, her voice carried the spark of genuine excitement. And somewhere in the turbulent sky above, lightning arced through the violet clouds, like the universe itself was applauding a moment where two very different lives, human and alien, had begun a connection forged through scars, laughter, and the strange gravity of shared curiosity. The ruined city stretched before them like the skeleton of a long-forgotten god, metal bones jutting into the violet sky, twisted towers tilting at improbable angles as though gravity itself had been arguing with them for centuries. Neon fog swirled around the collapsed streets, pulsating faintly with bioluminescent spores that had claimed dominion over what remained of the once great structures. The human soldier trudged ahead, boots crunching against fractured alloy and glass shards, and the princess followed cautiously, her long ears flicking at every new sound, her silver-tinted skin reflecting flashes of electric light. She was quiet for a moment, eyes wide, absorbing the chaos of alien architecture, impossible arches, spiraling walkways suspended in midair, and remnants of once glorious energy shields now flickering like dying stars. He noticed her hesitation and threw a casual glance back, smirking beneath the scratches and grime of his face. "Don't worry," he called, voice carrying easily despite the whistling wind. "The buildings aren't going to attack you. Most of them are retired. The ones that aren't, well, they've mostly forgotten how to aim." She raised an eyebrow at him, skeptical, but the corner of her mouth twitched into something like a smile. "Forgotten how to aim," she echoed. "You make it sound as if these ruins were sentient beings with grudges." "They kind of are," he said, stepping over a protruding cable that hissed faintly when touched. "Mostly old war tech with a strong sense of self-preservation and a terrible attitude. There was one that tried to argue with me about the morality of eating protein rations last week. I lost. Morally, anyway. Physically, I survived. That counts for something." The princess shook her head, laughing softly despite the jagged environment around them. Her laughter carried a faint musical quality, slightly amplified by the empty towers, and for a fleeting moment, the harsh alien city seemed less threatening. "You make surviving sound almost entertaining," she said. "Almost," he quipped, grinning as he limped past a half-collapsed plaza. "Come on, you're going to tell me you wouldn't laugh if a rogue drone demanded to duel you with a plasma sword because it didn't like your haircut." She giggled, covering her mouth with a delicate hand. "I think I would have, yes, depending on the haircut." They rounded a corner where the fog was thickest, neon lights pulsing faintly like distant heartbeats, and he paused, surveying the scene. "All right, confession time," he said, voice dropping conspiratorially. "Most of my best stories involve narrowly escaping death in absurd ways. There was the time I got chased through a zero-gravity cafeteria by a mech unit that argued philosophy while trying to kill me. Then there was the incident with the hyper-intelligent space goats, and I swear one of them might have been plotting a coup. I survived. Barely. And with dignity mostly intact, though the dignity part is subjective." The princess tilted her head, fascinated. "Space goats plotting a coup." "Yes," he said, shrugging as if it were perfectly normal. "Apparently, when you're highly intelligent and underfed, forming a political party is a natural response. And if you encounter humans, you're legally obligated to chase them. Something about interstellar regulations. Honestly, the paperwork was worse than the chase." Her laughter rang out again, bouncing off broken walls and empty towers, and for a moment, the neon fog seemed to brighten around her. She shook her head, trying to absorb the absurdity of his life. "And all these scars," she said, her voice softer now, "they're from things like this." He nodded, gesturing broadly at the jagged skyline. "Mostly." Some are from bad decisions, others from spectacularly unfortunate coincidences. And a few are from genuine heroism, if you count surviving a sentient swarm of nanobots while dressed as a holographic sandwich. She blinked at him, and he could see the amusement and incredulity battling for dominance in her expression. "A holographic sandwich?" she asked, half laughing. "That's somehow even worse than the space goats." "Worse," he said, mock-offended, placing a hand over his chest. "I'll have you know it was the peak of tactical ingenuity. I distracted the nanobots with illusions of edible foods while simultaneously navigating a collapsing corridor. It was practically poetry, in motion, chaotic, violent, but poetic." Her laughter was soft now, tinged with wonder, and he let himself grin, leaning back against a half-collapsed energy barrier. "See, humor saves lives. It's a tactical advantage, I promise." They continued through the ruins, the princess stepping lightly over debris, her long ears flicking at every unexpected sound. She glanced at his body, the way his scars twisted across muscle and skin, the way his movements carried both fatigue and practiced skill. "You make it all sound so manageable," she said. "Even the terrifying parts." "I manage," he said, shrugging. "Mostly by pretending the universe is absurd and I'm the lead character in a very dark comedy. You'd be amazed how effective that mindset is when fighting for your life." She watched him for a moment, curiosity sparking in her eyes. "And the first battle?" she asked softly. "The one that started this?" He took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as he studied the ruined cityscape. "Ah, yes, the first one. That was an introduction to how unfair everything can be. It involved malfunctioning defense drones, an alien beverage that exploded when mixed with plasma, and a squad mate who thought it'd be funny to replace my helmet visor with a live feed of his breakfast. I survived, obviously, but it was messy, very messy, also sticky." She laughed, long and bright, the sound echoing in the ruins. "Sticky?" she asked, incredulous but amused. "Yes," he said, grinning, rubbing at a stubborn smear on his forearm. "Some things you just can't wash off, no matter the interstellar soap. But it's a story worth remembering." The princess shook her head, fascinated, her gaze flicking from his scars to the jagged city, to the streaking violet clouds above. You survive everything," she said quietly, "and yet you still find it funny." "Mostly," he said, leaning back on a fallen piece of debris, hands behind his head. "The universe is a cruel place. Laughing at it keeps you sane. Or makes you look insane, which has similar survival benefits in the long run. You'd be surprised how often opponents underestimate a laughing soldier." They paused at a reflective puddle, the neon fog swirling within it like liquid starlight. She knelt slightly, tracing the outline of his reflection with a finger hovering above the water. "All this," she murmured, "and you still have life in you, humor in you." "Yeah," he said, watching her reaction carefully. "It's a survival tactic, I promise. And sometimes it makes companions like you feel better about sticking around." As they moved deeper into the ruins, the storm shifting above in electric pulses, the princess felt a growing connection to this human, scarred, unpredictable, and oddly comforting in the midst of chaos. His humor, his absurd stories, his resilience, all painted a picture of courage that was entirely new to her. It wasn't just bravery. It was wit, adaptability, and the ability to face the impossible with a smirk. For the first time since she had arrived on this battered planet, she didn't feel fear. She felt intrigue, amusement, and admiration all at once. And as the neon fog swirled and the distant spires of the ruined city groaned under ancient weight, she realized she was ready to follow him through whatever absurd, dangerous, and hilarious adventures lay ahead. The neon fog over the crater swirled thick and alive, casting rippling reflections across the jagged metal debris strewn like bones of an ancient beast. The human soldier crouched at the edge, boots balanced precariously on a half-collapsed spire that leaned into the glowing haze, and the princess hovered beside him, ears twitching as they caught the faintest hum of distant energy currents. Below, the crater churned with shifting, bioluminescent gases, casting undulating green and violet patterns that danced over their faces, painting both his scars and her silver skin in eerie, beautiful light. "You know," he said, voice pitched to rise above the low rumble of the fog, "there are moments when survival feels more like choreography than strategy. You plan the steps and hope the universe doesn't decide to trip you on the last one." The princess tilted her head, long ears brushing a faint arc of lightning that split the violet sky. "And yet you keep dancing," she said softly, eyes scanning his scars with a mixture of wonder and concern. "Every misstep, every chaotic moment you survive, and somehow you make it funny." "Mostly," he replied, smirking, though a flicker of weariness crossed his face. "The funny part keeps me from crying in inconvenient places, like over a snack that just vaporized in my hand. Or, when alien drones try to turn me into abstract art." He gestured vaguely toward the shifting crater below, voice tinged with both humor and sincerity. "But it's true. Surviving's easier when you can laugh at yourself. Or at least at your misfortune. Bonus points if someone else laughs too." She laughed lightly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her shimmering face. "I think I've learned a lot from that," she admitted, her voice quiet but steady. "About courage, about living despite fear, and about finding light even in chaos." He nodded slowly, eyes tracing the spinning mists below. "Yeah, that's the thing about battles, even the ones you survive and the ones you barely make it through. The scars, they tell the story, sure, but the jokes, the little ridiculous moments, they keep you human. Or humanish, depending on the species." She smiled, ears flicking with a faint shiver of amusement. "And I think I understand that now. Courage isn't just facing death, it's surviving it with your mind intact, and your humor, and your stubbornness." He chuckled, leaning back against a warped support beam, gaze tracing the jagged skyline where the neon fog met the storm-lit clouds. "Stubbornness is essential," he said, voice low but carrying a teasing edge. "Without it, you get vaporized for minor infractions or chased by sentient furniture, or," he paused, mock horror in his tone, "stuck explaining why your armor smells like alien sandwiches." She laughed, covering her mouth, but her eyes remained fixed on him, admiration growing alongside the warmth of connection. You really are unbelievable," she said, her tone a mixture of disbelief and awe. "And yet, despite it all, you remain you. You haven't changed into someone bitter or cautious. You're alive, fully alive." "Mostly," he said, leaning back further and kicking a shard of metal into the swirling fog. "Mostly alive, with occasional bouts of foolish optimism and the occasional questionable decision. But alive. And sometimes, that's the best anyone can do." For a long moment, they watched the crater together, the glowing gases swirling like liquid auroras, the distant hum of unstable energy currents mixing with the faint scent of ionized ozone. Then, without warning, a ripple of light shot from the crater's center, pulsing in strange geometric patterns, and the princess froze, ears standing sharply. "What is that?" she whispered. He leaned forward, squinting through the fog, then shrugged with a faint grin. "That, my young friend, is either a spectacularly angry planetary core or a welcome committee. Or both. Either way, it's beautiful, isn't it?" She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Beautiful, yes. Terrifying, definitely." "Terrifying is subjective," he said, voice low, conspiratorial. "I call it dramatic flair, makes surviving it all more rewarding." And more entertaining, which is the important part. The light pulsed again, illuminating their faces in alternating flashes. He glanced at the princess, noting the awe in her expression, and felt a sudden, profound sense of connection, not just between himself and her, but between the human capacity for resilience and the alien fascination with it. "You know," he said, voice quieter now, "I never thought someone like you would find any of this engaging. But here you are, laughing, questioning, and somehow understanding. That's rarer than surviving a swarm of nanobots while dressed as a holographic sandwich." Her ears twitched, and she tilted her head, faint blush on her silver skin. I think I do understand," she admitted, voice steadying. "Not just your battles, but your perspective. You've survived everything, yet you've held onto something that most of my people, my court, would have lost. Humor, hope, resilience." He shrugged, a faint smirk curling his scarred lips. "Hope is a useful weapon. Humor, even more so. Resilience, that's just stubbornness wrapped in bad armor. But it works." A sudden gust of wind swept across the crater, carrying neon spores that tangled with their hair and clothing. He glanced down, eyes narrowing as a small, flickering light darted across the fog, a rogue surveillance drone, still functioning despite decades of neglect. He raised a hand, preparing to ward it off with a practiced flick of an energy pulse, and the princess laughed, ears twitching. "You'd fight that thing, even now." "Even now," he said, voice dry, leaning casually against the warped metal. "It's not the fighting I enjoy," he added, smirking at her. "It's proving that surviving absurdity is an art form. And this little guy, he's a critic." The drone whirred closer, then paused midair, scanning them with a faint blue beam. He gestured lazily, and it zipped away, apparently satisfied that they were not worth its attention. He let out a long breath, exhaling in amusement. "See, humor saves lives. Even drones appreciate it eventually." The princess shook her head, laughing softly. "You truly see the universe differently," she said. "Not just as danger, but as something to interact with, to laugh with, even in its chaos." "Mostly to laugh with," he said, smirking. "Danger, that's just the seasoning, makes the punchline better." They lingered at the crater's edge, neon fog swirling around them, the distant storm flashing electric arcs across the jagged skyline. Slowly, deliberately, she reached out and placed a hand on his scarred arm, a gesture both tentative and firm, a silent acknowledgement of trust. He looked down at her, a faint grin tugging at his lips. "See," he said softly, voice low enough that only she could hear, "sometimes trust is a form of survival, and occasionally it's more fun than surviving alone." She smiled, ears flicking, silver skin catching the neon glow. "I think I've learned that. About you, about life, about courage." "And I've learned," he said, voice soft but playful, "that sometimes the universe rewards foolish stubbornness with remarkable companions, even if they have a tendency to gasp at every scar." Her laughter bubbled again, bright and unrestrained, echoing across the crater and mingling with the electric hum of distant storms. He joined her, voice low, carrying a rare note of warmth beneath the habitual humor. "You know," he said, "I think surviving this long and surviving this with someone like you beside me, that's worth more than any medal or weapon or ridiculous story I've ever collected." The princess tilted her head, studying him with eyes wide, ears twitching in the shifting light. "And I think I've never met anyone like you," she said softly, voice almost lost in the hum of energy currents. "You've changed my view of courage, of survival, of life." He nodded, a faint chuckle escaping. "And you've reminded me," he said, "that sometimes it's not just surviving the chaos, it's laughing with someone else through it that counts. Makes it meaningful, and maybe, just maybe, fun." They stayed there, side by side, watching the neon fog pulse and swirl, listening to the distant hum of energy and the low crackle of lightning across the violet sky. The ruins, the storms, the scars, they were all part of the story now, woven into something larger. A shared understanding, a bond forged through laughter, survival, and the peculiar grace of being human and alien together. For the first time in countless battles, the soldier felt the weight of scars without pain, and the princess felt the thrill of courage without fear. The universe remained chaotic, absurd, and dangerous, But in that moment, it was also luminous, unpredictable, and undeniably alive. And together they had survived it, laughed at it, and somehow made it theirs. The storm finally eased, the neon fog dimmed to a gentle glow, and the two figures, one scarred, one shimmering, both profoundly changed, stepped back from the crater's edge. Ahead lay whatever the galaxy would offer next, but they would meet it with humor, courage, and the quiet certainty that survival was sweeter when shared. And in the lingering light of Viridian 7, as the violet clouds parted just enough to reveal distant twin suns, there was a sense of completion, not an ending, but a promise that the story and their bond would endure.